honored and proud to have Gretchen Skelkin on today again. Almost every other Monday, Gretchen's here. Has been so instrumental in building this program and being oh a great source of insight and knowledge from her daily experience doing it, not just talking about it. And the word of the day is compliment. And I always feel Gretchen's a compliment. So I put those two together. And with that said, chat's open. We really rely on you to direct our conversation. We have a lot of things that we think about, but we'd rather think about the things you want to know about and make us more relevant and valuable for the time we have. Renadeb is here. Thank you. I have to always put the first comment out. It's like the tip jar, everybody's waiting for the first. So thank you, Renadeb. Great you can join us today. So, while the comments are coming through, Gretchen, why don't you bring everybody a little bit up to date on what you're doing? Gretchen's also the host of the Plight Attendant, and if you haven't seen it, I would really advocate doing it and get to see and know Gretchen even more. With that, Gretchen, why don't you share a little update and what your initial thoughts on compliment is?
Yeah, so just a little update on me. If you don't know, here you go. I have been spending a lot of my time in the car lately because I am up and back to see my family in Alabama, where we are looking to move to be closer to family. But also in addition to that, I am starting actually my first mastermind group. Oh, who knew I would do that? We start on Saturday, and then I'm doing pre-registration for the group that's going to start in October. So I'm super excited about that. Did not think I would do it, but I got invited into a mastermind, and it has been such an amazing experience that I thought I would love to be able to expose people to that so they could see how amazing and wonderful it is from the same perspective that I have had being able to do it. So that's new for me, but I'm excited to do it. And then just the usual stuff. Yeah. But a lot of it is kind of moving forward in a direction that is really just more focused on, helping people get the most out of whatever is happening in their experience right now. Because again, not everybody's going to go through the same thing and come out of it with the same understanding, learning, or impact to their lives. And so I actually love the word of the day, compliment, because the completeness of things is so important. Like we all love closure. So we think of something that's complete as having a beginning, a middle, and an ending. And so the complement of things where we bring whatever it is full circle it's something that is necessary, but I also think it's something that the gift is not rushing it. The gift is not rushing anything to completion. So the complement of that, the complement of anything is what it means for you, right? So whether it is, I made a post today about my newsletter, right? And I highlight 3 amazing people, and I see 2 of them in the audience right now. I see Chastity Alexander and Amabella. I love both of them. They have both been featured in my newsletter. And that to me is also, bringing something to completion, the compliment of knowing them and knowing how wonderful they are and wanting to share them with other people. That is also a sort of compliment, in my opinion. Compliment with an E being the completeness of it. So yeah, I love that word. I'm always so happy when I get to see the word that gets chosen for your shows, because they're so good when you really take a deep dive into not just what they mean, but like what they mean for you, because it's all good. It's going to be different for everybody.
Yeah, and that's why I try to look at someone's profile, especially someone new, pick out the word that's a
Yeah.
big thing. Like tomorrow, we're going to have Dina Lefkowitz, and she's into relationships, so that's the word. Yesterday, we had Sarah Dawkins, and it was happiness, because even she admitted when she goes into town, no one knows her name, but everybody says, "Oh, you're the happy lady that's always smiling."
I love it. Yeah.
You know, and I think Gretchen's kind of evolved just as I have since our first show, maybe 8, 9 months ago,
Yeah.
to understanding that openness and promoting others is the best way of promoting yourself to others,
Yeah.
right? And there's too many people who are coming from scarcity that think that
Yeah.
what someone has, they should have had, even though there's so much opportunity to have. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you have to deserve what you get. No one is given anything, not in what I'm doing. And if you are good enough, people will support you. And it's not about getting attention, it's about earning appreciation and trust. Gretchen?
I love that because there are a lot of sayings out there that people can know and kind of latch onto that speak to exactly what you just said. But it's also the same kind of thing that I've talked with people about before, and that is when you're out there and you're doing, what you know to be right and good at and all those kind of things, everything else naturally falls into place. And I was just having conversation with someone about that very thing. And in the context of a job search, sorry, my throat's very dry today. I don't know why, but so in the context of a job search, and what does that look like? And a lot of people will, when they go to look for a new job, they look for title and salary, right? I want this title because this title I had or most closely aligns with the title I had before, and I need this salary because that's what I made before, and I got to stay on par and da 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 da. And I was like, okay, all fine and good and cool, great. However, let's think about it. Let's flip it around and say, okay, what do you do? Try to search by task, try to search by the activity, try to search by the thing that you know you're good at that you do, right? Not what it's called and not what it pays. Because again, when you're in that environment and you are doing the thing that you're good at, that you like doing, right? People notice it and other opportunities come to you from that. I started a job years ago as a content manager. That was great. It was great. I was really good at it, but I was also good at seeing, well, what about this and what about that? And we should do this and content is this and blah, blah, blah. And it grew into a 24-person department, content creative services, that did not exist before I got there. But there was a need for it. If you're in the thing and you're doing your magic, magic happens. It does. The challenge is having the belief that it will and the patience to wait for the right opportunity for it to happen. And it does. But a lot of times people will quit on it early because it didn't match up or line up with their personal schedule for it to happen. And I go back to one of the things that is, it's a saying that I use all the time, and I have to constantly remind myself, don't push the river. Don't push it. Wait for things to happen in the natural order that they will happen. When you try to shoehorn things into a structure and a schedule that you've determined for your life, even though it has all these other elements going into it that you can't control, that is a great recipe for unhappiness. Don't do it.
Well, that's so true, and what you create then is conflict within yourself. Knowing the right thing, doing the wrong thing for the wrong reason, but for the right result, right? Because of the money, because of whatever it is that makes you do things that are not natural. And I think complement is a direct relationship to alignment, right? When what you do complements what you've been doing and what you want to do, now you're more aligned, which is just the opposite of being conflicted or disjointed. And the other thing, Gretchen's so right. Everything has its time and reason and place. And if you can have the patience, the understanding why you're waiting, because it's not here yet. Do you go to the airport 4 hours before your company comes in? No, you check to see when's the plane going to come in. I'll get there an hour early, maybe. Yeah. But that's the key, is be on time for yourself. And, if that's your whole world, you have too small a world, right? Go ahead.
Yeah. Greg. I was also going to say, along with, and again, I want to use both words, compliment with an E and compliment with an I, because I do also think that they are related. So I started by talking about what brings things to completion, but again, you're that special sauce in there. So the compliment with the I which is the praise for things, that will naturally happen when you're bringing yourself to things. But again, going back to that schedule and letting things unfold when they can, that does not mean you should never plan for something. You shouldn't try to look ahead and see where you can help influence things. That doesn't mean that. That is, of course, very important. But you have to, in doing that, also understand that there is a natural order and progression and other things that are going to happen. You can only control so much. But it's when you have and you strap yourself to this expectation that it has to be at a certain level and it has to be at a certain amount of money. It has to happen in a certain amount of time, or that's it. Why is that it? Why do you want to make yourself, why do you want to set yourself up for being unhappy? You know, because that's what that does. Because the world isn't, you know, the world has its own cadence and you're part of that and you have your own. So figure out what matters to you, what really does work for you. And if your lifestyle does require a certain threshold of compensation to make everything, you know, make all the trains run on time, make everything happen in your life and for the people in your life, there are a lot of ways to do that. And so again, thinking through what that looks like for you and all the different opportunities that can go into it. It's generally not a single source answer. There are many ways to make it happen. But again, the uphill battle that most people face is we've strapped conditions to it. And if those conditions aren't met, that's it. It's never going to work. And that's not fair. You deserve better than that, you know?
Well, and it also kind of says you believe you have control over everything outside of yourself. So
Right.
when you're trying to stuff a round peg in a square hole,
Yeah.
you know, no matter how hard you try, even if it sticks for a while, it's not sustainable. And I think the key element to everything we're talking about with complement is getting more aligned, but also the more aligned you are in the moment, the more now you are, the less of the past you're carrying forward, the less of the future you're fearing forward, where
Yeah.
you can just say, well, I wanted to make $100, but based on what I learned yesterday, I'm happy making 70 today.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm happy making this. So if you're constantly allowing the adjustment to take place based on the feedback, based on your culture, your environment, the people around you, you have to discount certain things and you have to make other things more valuable, right? All of a sudden, hey, 10 people want it, I only got 2. This is going to be more valuable. I got 10, 2 people are the only ones who need it. I'm going to have to do something. And that's the key, is feel confident in your ability to adjust, not project, right? Projections are nice, but they're just that, you know, by this time I'm going to have that. Well, that's what your mindset was when you made that number. What has changed in the last week, month or two? And are you on course, ahead of course? Because here's the other thing. By setting projections, not only do you put more pressure on yourself, a lot of times you under project. I think more times in my life, I shot too low
Yeah.
as opposed
Yeah.
to shooting too high. I never had to worry about high because the world would come back at me and tell me, here's where you believe. But before we go too far, let me share all these wonderful people and faces. Renadeb's here. Omar's here. Omar's a great guy. He's doing some really cool stuff. I have I'd like to be able to say it, but I'm afraid. But thank you for coming. It's always nice to have so many people from Nigeria. I think Ambimbola is should get a medal. Dennis says, compliment both of you for tipping us and educating us on complimenting us on others. You know, it becomes a community, you know, and I don't differentiate audience from stage. It's just who can see everybody and who can't in the way we're showing. Kelly's here. Kelly's the best. She's got her show, The Awesome Journey, you know, tomorrow, 1:11 p.m. Eastern Time with Christy Howard. Great show. Sheaf is here from Canada. Thanks for being here. Renadeb says, a compliment is required for the hardworking individual who is working in the organization, and it helps the individual have a positive attitude. For sure. I mean, if you're going to take something to a party, why not make it positive? If you're going to come to work, why not be the positive influence instead of taking it away? She says, everything is hard before it's easy. Stay in the game. the game is always between you and yourself. You make the rules, you decide to score, you decide when you win, when you lose, when you quit. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the compliment out. For sure. You're well deserved. I would say 10, 20 years from now, look at Am Bambola, where she was today and where she's going to be.
She is a mover and a shaker, man. Oh yeah. She was one of my connections in my newsletter. Absolutely. Yep.
Well, let me share one of the cool things that really is a compliment to the show. My grandson, who's 10 years old, gravitated to this show. He's seen every show now for 3 weeks, every day. And he either sees it live or as soon as he comes home from school, he watches the whole show.
Nice.
And what it says is everybody has the benefit of sharing so many wonderful things with everybody if it's at a level where everybody only has the positive to deal with.
Yeah.
The encouragement. I think if everybody had a little bit more, go get them, Tiger, we're here for you. That gives people the confidence because now you've got a family. And I think that's so important. Melissa's here. Thank you so much. I know whenever Gretchen comes, Melissa comes, Chastity comes.
We have a Twitch guy here. I'm so excited. Twitch is in the house. Yeah.
Okay, well, let me see.
Uh-huh.
Add that building. When nothing goes right, go left.
Yep.
Dean's here. Dean's another wonderful individual. Supports so many different shows. Okay. Don't I shy away from what I don't know. So Gretchen, that's the beauty of it, is one word that you take for granted or one thought that you've used for a long time to someone brand new.
Yeah.
That could be a revelation. That's a compliment that what you're giving is not, I guess, when you look at compliment, a lot of people look at, oh, you're wearing a pretty dress today. Something very visible, something very easy to distinguish. But when you can compliment somebody with, here's a poem, right? Here's a picture. Mm-hmm. Here's something that I just recognize about your nature. The intangibles are so cool because they're so hard to copy and replicate. What's your thoughts, Gretchen?
I have a couple of thoughts, and I don't want to lose one, but I do want to mention, to me, some of the highest forms of compliment are not verbally transferred, right? They're that love, trust, respect that you have for somebody else. What a huge compliment. Another great compliment that a lot of people, I don't know, see it as a compliment, but it is. Anytime someone comes to you and asks for help, advice, any of that support, just they want to run something by you. What a huge sign that they value you. What a compliment that is. Like, wow. So I just think there are a lot of, the word compliment, I think a lot of times people with the I think of it as like gratuitous kind of stuff, but it's not. And I think that if you can kind of change your perspective about what you think about it, it opens up so many possibilities. You're probably complimenting a lot of people just by showing up in their lives. What a compliment this audience is, right? And they're both types of compliment. They complete the show because they are what makes it really great, their interaction. And they're also what a compliment to you, that they love it so much and love, listening to you so much that they show up every day for you. And I also want to mention something too. You talked about projections. And I wanted to be clear that we're not talking about not setting goals for yourself. Goals are very important, but what happens this goes into the fluidity of things and the fluidity of bringing things to completion. And there is fluidity. There is understanding and allowing for and accepting the fact that your goals can shift and change. And that's okay. You can have an end goal of, the most common one is like losing 50 pounds or something like that. You can have an end goal of becoming a VP of something. You can have an end goal of having a family. You can have an end goal of all these things, but along the way, you may have subtle course corrections that you need to make at that time in your life that will take you a little bit in a different direction, still on the way to getting to that goal. What happens for a lot of people is when they have those course corrections, it's terrible. Like right now, I'm in the middle of a big course correction in my life because we are going to be moving. And the reason for that is very personal to me. And so that also has a ripple effect in my business and other relationships that I have. And I'm working through that because again, that's just a minor course correction, but there've been so many cool new things that I've learned along the way. I'm actually doing something now with this mastermind that I would never have done before. I would have even thought about it. So those little course corrections, you're still tracking to goal. But wow, the new, like the new richness, the new texture of that goal just changes with every new experience you have, and every course correction still is moving you forward if you can see it that way. And so that's where I want to mention with goals, there needs to be flexibility in terms of how, when, and the path that it takes to reach those goals. And that's going to be personal to everyone. No two people are going to walk the same path toward goal achievement. They're just not. Life doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and I think we need to always distinguish between short-term and long-term compliment,
Yeah.
right? And how was it earned? If you've been watching something for 6 months or working with somebody for a period of time, that compliment is genuine and authentic because it's been tested over time, right? How do they show up? How do they support? How are they sharing? And I think at the end of the day, a compliment is also based on fairness.
Mm-hmm.
What's fair? Doesn't this person deserve to be recognized? Doesn't this person, I always promote myself to say something nice to somebody while I'm waiting on them, right? How
Mm-hmm.
many times are you at a checkout, right? And you're just sitting there waiting for them to do whatever they do, put the coupons in or whatever. And it's so easy to notice something about them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And at the end say, boy, you were sure quick with getting me through the line. Thank you so much, or
Yeah.
I just love how positive you are. That makes the person's day because they feel appreciated. And I think that's why people stay and persevere when they feel they got a seat at the table, when they feel they are an equal,
Yep.
and that's what people are always more into. What's your numbers? What's your results? What'd you get?
Yeah.
Instead of what did you learn? What did you do? I had so many people come to work for me, and a lot of people would say, I just feel really bad. I got to start at the bottom, and I would say, you're only here as long as you want to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Start climbing, start learning, start getting better. That's the beginning. If you want to make it the end, that's fine. And to your point, Gretchen, I would always tell people it's not what you make here, it's who you become here, because
Yeah.
that'll be the biggest value, right? And hopefully, if you become a lot, you'll deserve a lot and you'll get more. Gretchen?
Yeah. I worked for a company once, and they had one of the best new employee onboarding programs that I've ever seen. And it was long, it was like a month or so. And the reason for that was that if you were hired into, let's say you were hired into marketing or sales, you spent a certain amount of time in every department. So you knew the company when you started your job. That information, like you saw how it all fit together and how it could work together and how what you do matters beyond your department, matters to the customer because you spent time with the customers too, right? So like when I shadowed the sales department as part of my onboarding, and I did live customer calls. It was great. I'd never done anything like that before, and it gave me a real understanding of not just how the business operated, but why it operated, why it was important to do that. And I think that's also really important because you talk about connection. One of the best ways to break connection is to not hear the other person, or to have them feel unheard. If you feel unheard, you're not going to feel valued. If you don't feel valued, you don't have a connection with that person. That is a breakdown. And
Mhm.
sometimes just giving people the space and the grace to listen, to hear, to say what they need to say, or participate in the way they need to participate, right? And that's also a great compliment to them. You're allowing them, what they have to contribute is unique, and you don't know what they have to contribute unless you give them the space and the opportunity to do it. And then you can figure out like, wow, what can we do with this? It's great. I mean, I think that is such a great thing. And I think it's also a compliment to the person who's doing it, right? Because they have that openness and that ability to want to take in, something new that wasn't there before and see where it can take them.
Yeah, and I think so much relies on trust. And because if you want people to be open, you need to be as open or more. You need to take the lead in openness.
Yeah.
You can't say we're a family, but you're excluded from these conversations, right?
Yeah.
Or to include you on these emails or whatever. And it's almost like who sets the boundaries here? How do they change? And all of a sudden you got people thinking about a game that they never had to play or think about if they were just focused on, I'm coming here to give you my best, learn the most, contribute the best. I mean, where everybody is helping everybody. I always believed the people at the top had an obligation to the people at the bottom, not the other way around. The smarter people, the better people should be the ones on the line. I hated managers who weren't working managers, who would have
the other thing,
advisors and they wouldn't do any of the work. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, the other thing too is that, having that, and there are going to be some things that not everything can be disclosed at all levels. I mean, for liability and all, there are tons of reasons. But at the end of the day, there is a level of transparency that is necessary to have in any relationship, business or otherwise. You have to have that. You, again, to Amitab's point, you cannot have trust without that. And the other part of that too, why that's important and why that's very true, is that in the absence of information, people will always make their own reality. They will create a narrative to explain what they don't have information to explain. It's just the way our brains work. We're gap fillers. That's what we want to do. We don't know. And I'll go back to the same example I've given you before. And there are a lot of reasons people do this, but if you've ever texted somebody, this is the best way I know to prove to yourself that we all do it. You texted someone. They didn't get back to you right away. They took a while. Maybe they never got back to you. And if at any point while you're waiting for them to get back to your very important text, did you wonder, are they mad at me? Are you mad at me? What did I say? Or am I not important to you? I must not be important. They're not even going to respond to my text. Those kind of things we do in the absence of information. Why I'm not hearing back from this text, people create their own reality. They must be mad at me. They must not care about me. I'm not important. Everybody does it. And that's not to say it's a bad thing. It's just to understand we all do it. So for business leaders or anyone in any relationship at all, you got to have a level of transparency and flow of information. You have to have it. You cannot have trust or connection without it.
Well, I think you're so right. And too many people have too much pride that isn't justified. Right? Because let's say you have a Zoom call and someone's now 3-4 minutes late. And now you're wondering, did they forget? Did they not care? No show, no call. And you say, well, I'm going to go 5 minutes or 8 minutes, whatever the number is, and then I'm done. But you're having this discussion between yourself. Yeah. You could be texting them. And maybe did you notify them in advance? Did you give them enough notice that if they forgot, if something happened, because that happens too, someone got a ticket, someone got a flat tire, something came up, right? And why not think, well, I don't know, but I'll reach out. Because if you're going to ask yourself that question and needle yourself, take that question and ask that person. And you don't have to say, and I agree with Gretchen, the two things are either you spaced it because I'm not important, or you got an issue that I don't even know, but you're already just taking 2 out of millions of different combinations and just say, and usually what I do is I take responsibility. I'll always say, sorry if there was any confusion on my part that this call, we couldn't make the call today. Let me know. Right? It doesn't say, let's have another call. It just let me know. And then if someone doesn't let you know, they let you know.
Yeah. I think in those moments, that's where that power of self-command comes in really handy, so that we don't do or say something that once it's out there, you can't take it back. And I've watched people, I mean, it's that is so important, because I've watched people ruin relationships, tank, their careers, because in a moment they responded to something just like that in a way that was not thought out, was not true to them, was reactionary. So, when those things happen and you are sort of creating that narrative in your head, sit with that for a moment, take a moment, ask yourself, what don't I know about this situation? How do I know this to be true? If you've ever, like Byron Katie, her book, The Work, it's a great, great thing to actually try when something is happening and you're like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. How do I know this is true? How do I know that what I think about this situation is in fact true? I've used another one where you're in a meeting and somebody gets on their phone. Maybe you have a parking lot rule where they put the phone away and all of a sudden they've flipped it over and picked it up and they're, and you're like, what is that? But, you don't know why they're engaging with it. I've used this example again before too. Nothing new that I'm saying here, but what if that person just got like that 911 text from their child's school? Does that change your opinion about them engaging with their phone? Absolutely, it does. Because again, you've taken them from being like the problem to being a person. There's a reason we do and don't do things. And what is it that we don't know that we're not seeing in this situation? And going back to that transparency, there will be times you can't know. You can't know, but like you just said, Don, ask. If you don't ask, how many times do people are you like the go between, the middle person? Like, you're friends with this person, you're friends with this person, you're all three friends. They're mad at each other. They're not talking to each other about it, but they're telling you all about it, right? How many times does that happen where you're just like, if you guys could just talk to each other about it, I'm sure you could work it out. If you can speak to each other about it in the right way, obviously mutually respectful, caring way, seeing each other again as people, not problems. And I think that's something that is a great skill to have when we can do that, so that person who challenges us, we still see the humanity in that person. We still understand they're a person with a complex life, like we all have, with a lot going on. Nobody walks through life perfectly from beginning, middle to end. And where can we meet them and help them with that? Like, we can partner with them for everybody's mutual benefit, when you can stop seeing them as a problem and as a person. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so valuable. And when you really look at that also, how many people do you wish don't show up?
Yeah.
Right? It comes down to the importance of that person, right? It's like, hey, listen, give me 2 more minutes, I'm out of here. I really wasn't too excited about the call, don't know the person. So if they give me a reason, I'm gone. Versus, hey, if I get this client, it solves all of my issues for the next 5 years. You'll sit there forever. And you'll be polite when you reach out and say, sorry you couldn't make it today. Is there something we can talk? I mean, so it's a reflection of how you value the people to determine if it's worth asking. Because sometimes they say, well, they took care of the responsibility for me. They never showed up. I'm out of it. Right? Versus, is that who I want to be? The person that looks for other people to give me reasons to do things I should have been doing without them, and I should make appointments that I'm happy aren't met.
But yeah, I mean, and an easy way to do that is, like, before you respond to an event or situation, and again, this isn't new. You've heard people say it before, but most people don't do it. Flip it around. If somebody's late to your meeting and they didn't let you know they were running late or had whatever, how many times that happened to you? Where, you're on the way out the door and your dog, I'm gonna say this because mine does it all the time, jumps up on you, please don't go, and actually tears the hem of your dress. And now we have to do a change. And I'm frantic and I'm running around and I've got to get out the door and I think I'm going to be okay, but I didn't text you because I thought I'd make it. Or what if that in your frenzy, you run out, you get in the car, you drive away and realize you left your phone on the kitchen counter. You can't text somebody because you don't have it. Again, those are all things that happen in everyday life. Life happens during work hours, and the same on the converse. Things are going to go on all day, every day. And if you have an obligation, and to Maria's point, yeah, it is everybody's responsibility to meet your obligations. It's also everyone's responsibility to understand the human part of humanness and understand that sometimes you don't get to control the shots. You don't get to control the situation. You have to just respond to what is presented to you. And how would you prefer somebody do that to you? I would always prefer to give somebody the benefit of the doubt because I know for sure I want it. So if I'm late, or if somebody's late to my meeting, or I have a client who doesn't let me know or just doesn't show up, my first thought is concern. I hope everything's okay. And I genuinely mean that. I hope everything's okay. Let me know if you'd like to pick this back up at our regularly scheduled time, next week. Let me know, like whatever it is, but invite that person back into the conversation. Don't stop it by, well, you didn't show up, so that's it. I mean, there may be a good reason. You may also have been able to benefit from that little extra time that you just got back in your day. Instead, well, you would benefit from it if you weren't seething from anger because somebody disrespected you by being late for your meeting. Don't look at it that way. Think of all the different possibilities and what you can do with that. Because again, time is the only commodity that we get a finite amount of, and then it's gone. You can always make more money. And I know that sounds challenging for people who are challenged with that right now, but you can always make more money. You can always, have for lunch what you didn't get today. You can always, make that call if you didn't get it done today in your call list of your top 100 or whatever. But you don't get back that minute you spent angry that somebody didn't show up for your meeting. And being angry doesn't change the fact anyway. All it does is change your response to it and how you're going to respond to that person going forward. And so for that's where I say that power of self-command in that moment. Ask yourself the questions. How do I know that what I think is true is really true?
Well, and that is so correct. And a lot of times it's hard for people to be the better person. Be the person who is more tolerant than most people, more forgiving, more understanding. It can't be all or nothing. It can't be absolutes. Either someone's great or they're awful,
Yeah.
And the other thing I agree with Gretchen is until you space a meeting and feel so bad. And a lot of times because people have so many things going on. And a lot of times I'll look at my calendar and say, okay, Jim at 10:30, Mary at 12, this at 2. And I missed it by half an hour. It was really Mary at 1:30. And I just put it in my head and all of a sudden it's 2:00. And I look at my messages and it's like, where were you? Or what happened? And I feel so awful. And I also know that it's definitely in their wheelhouse to say, I'm not having another call. Right? I mean, I understand that could be the result and I would take responsibility, but I would also know that if it's first time and if someone's sincere, or, the other thing is, how fast did they get back to you once that happened? So if it was a 2:00 call and they finally looked at 1:47, I got a message, 15 minutes, I'm so sorry. I thought it was 2 versus a day later, oh, I must have spaced it. It's like, it changes because the reason for the call was to get to better know someone typically. By this, you already got better to know them without a call. Go ahead, Gretchen.
I was going to say, I have a really good, very personal example of why I always give somebody grace. And in 2014, it was late 2014, I had just started going to a new dentist that my husband had been going to. And I was like, okay, fine. I'm going to do it too. I wasn't, I was working in a different geographic area, so I didn't want to drive so far to the dentist. So anyway, I switched. And before I could have my first appointment with him, that was 2014. That was the end of 2014. That was when I gave my parents that hot air balloon ride for their 50th wedding anniversary. My mom was horribly injured in a crash landing that they had. She broke both arms at the tip of her humerus. So I go up to Alabama from South Florida. And I'm up there and I was like, oh no, I had my first appointment. So I had to reach out to his office and let them know I'm not going to be able to make it. I'm actually in another state. And here's the reason why. Let's reschedule. I know I'll be back because I had plane tickets. I'll be back, on this date. So let's do it then. Great. So that was late October when she had that accident. We were going to be, I think my first appointment was like early, like November. And so I had my next appointment that I was gonna go up with. And in the meantime, I had flown back and then I went back because my mom got put on this medication that oxycodone, it was an oxy product anyway, and it did not work well with her. And it was actually really bad. And so I went back up. And so I called them and I was like, I think I'll be back in time, but just in case, can we just move that date one more time? And they were like, yep, okay, no problem. I said, great. So go back. Now we're in like late, but it was Thanksgiving. So now we're going to be in December on this appointment. Third time. I did not expect to have to go back to Alabama. And the reason that I went back was because my niece died. She committed suicide, December 7th, 2014. And this is life. And unfortunately, it was my life at the time, but this is what happens in bigger and smaller in the same ways, in different ways. But events happen. I had to call this dentist back and say, I don't know when. Can we just maybe look at like March or April? And they said, you know what? Find a new dentist. You clearly don't know how to make your appointments. I said, wow. The airlines have worked with me, no problem, to reschedule and all this stuff and reimburse my tickets. But this dentist, and from his perspective, even though I was letting him know, and I stayed in contact with them to let them know, it was just too much. They were done, whatever. And that was fine. That was a relationship that was not meant for me to have. Not a problem. My husband actually ended up changing dentists after that because it was such a traumatic time for our family. And to have a service provider be like, nah, you can't make a simple appointment, so you're out of here. And again, neither one of those is right or wrong. It's just how people on both sides responded to the issue. And that's okay. But the point of that is you don't know why someone can or can't, make something happen that they want to make happen, that they probably need to make happen because other things are going on and they have to manage and juggle and schedule and do all these things to make all these other things happen. And if they're also in charge of a family or a business or something else or a team, that's even more that they have to schedule. So going back to what you're saying is be that person who's going to just be like, you know what do we need to do to make it happen? How can I make this work for you? If this isn't the right time, when might be a better time for you? Be available to do that. Because again, that's the nature of all relationships. It's not, unless it's a transactional relationship, you need something, here I am, boom, now we're done. Okay, fine. But that's the relationship I have with my cable provider. I don't want to have that relationship with a doctor or my family or my friends or anybody else. And I'm sure that they don't want to have a transactional relationship with me, but you have to allow for the messy, unplanned and unpredictable humanness part of that for it to work for everybody.
Yeah. And, the key is communication, understanding, trust, and one should not be in a position where someone else's issue creates a bigger issue for you, right? A lot of places are too tightly bound. Someone misses an appointment, they can't squeeze something in, they're over leveraged. And I found in business, the customer service side was your best sales arm, right? Because that's when you get to prove what you say is true.
Yep.
I bought this because you told me this, and if I ever had a problem, you would take care of me. And that's why it was like, hey, smile and fast. That's all you got to do in customer service. I'll deal with the manufacturers. I'll deal with whoever we got this stuff from. Don't keep the customer on the line because people talk. Yeah. And actually, a bad customer talks to like 4 times as many people as a good customer.
Yeah, they do. Yep.
And if you say, hey, it was $30, you killed a half an hour of your time, their time, and now they're angry.
Yeah.
right? We could have got taken care of in 2 minutes. And I got to the point where, hey, don't even deal with them. Just say, what's it going to take to make you happy? Right? Then there's no negotiation. If they
Yeah.
say, give me $10 and you say, fine, it's done. If you say, I'll give you 10, they'll probably say, give me 15. And now you're into a negotiation versus what do you want to make you happy? Or I can't do that. If you bought a $10 item and you want $1,000 back, that's not going to happen. But I think fast, happy, and no one has to know what you were thinking because you were probably half wrong anyways. You know, what is it when someone says, "Oh, and I know you were late because you didn't care and you should have known," and it's like right there, that's the conversation we're not going to have anymore. Go
But
ahead.
you know what? Anytime somebody does that, where they're like, I know you so well that I know why you didn't show up for my meeting. Give me the lottery numbers. Okay. If you can divine into my soul like that, which you can't because you're wrong. But if you think you can you please give me the Powerball numbers for the next jackpot? Because I can use that too. You're going to be as wrong about that as you are about knowing my internal reasoning for something when I may not have had any control over it in the first place. And if I did, you're not going to be right about that either. So that kind of reasoning, I always like to just approach that with a little bit of humor and be like, wow, I didn't know you could see into my soul so well. Can you give me the lottery numbers? Really? Because, that would be great. I mean, the premise is so ridiculous that you almost have to laugh at it when people do that.
Well, and
Yeah.
when I hear that, I just know they're not evolved enough to understand what they're even talking about.
Or they're angry, or that's coming from a place of anger and frustration. And so really when somebody's like, I know you didn't care about my meeting and that's why you didn't show up, clearly that has happened, or they've perceived that to happen in the past. That is somebody who probably does not feel valued, seen, or important in their own life. That is a window into their frustration and their anger about their own personal situation. And that's also not in all, but in some cases, it might be an invitation to get to know them a little bit better. They need something. They needed you to show up so that they could feel heard and seen in whatever way. Because again, if it was just a sales call, if it was just this, if it was just a meeting, people be like, well, yeah, we went ahead and decided that or whatever. You don't come at it from an emotional point. If you come at it from an emotional point, you have an emotional need that's not being met somewhere. And that's what you got to look at.
Exactly. And I think it also says when things come out like that, they're already in like that.
Yeah.
And when people come at you and you're like, where did that come from? How did that person even think of that? Because up until now, they've been so pleasant and polite. And you say, well, that's the real individual showing up. And a lot of it is jealousy. I've had some calls that like someone told me this and you said this or whatever. And it's like, I don't know who it is. I don't even know what it is, but now you're the he said, she said, and what, what difference does it make? Especially if you're not even affiliated. It's one thing if you work for some place, they do have some ability to kind of direct you or here's our policies or whatever. But if it's just an acquaintance, a friend, an associate, and they come at you with the riot act, and here's and it's like, even if I knew and I believed I knew for sure, I would give them the opportunity. Hey, I'm really curious. How did that how did that work out? How did that happen? So you give them the benefit to say, hey, I'm just confused here. I love some clarity. And more importantly, and I think if you're going to get down to it, you might as well go right into it. What did you mean by it? What did you expect me to respond to something like that? What was your thought? I understand what you said. I really understand what you meant.
Yeah.
I don't understand why and what this is all about.
I will say that, Ashif just has a step back and see a lot. And I think that he also has great quotes that he's putting on throughout this entire conversation. That is a very, very important thing. Sidestep the ego and go with humility is another one. But his comment at the top of the queue, step back and see a lot, is so good because give yourself that pause, right? If somebody's launching at you, don't meet them there. That's something that they have to express, and they're not doing it in the way that's going to be most constructive. But let them get it out. It's releasing a valve. Let them get out whatever they needed to get out. And then, let them know that you can pick this back up at a later time. Again, once emotions are heightened in any situation, no meaningful discussion is going to be had, because at that point, when you're invested in your emotion, you're invested in your rightness about the situation, or you're invested in the justification of your belief of your rightness about the situation, not in resolving the situation. So that's, when you get to that point with someone else, let them get it out, even if it means you have to just step back or walk away or whatever, and then come back to it at another time. And, cooler heads prevailing and all that. But again, heightened emotion is not the time to work through a real situation. It's not fair to the person who's in the grip of their anger or their resentment or their fear or whatever's driving that emotion. And it's not fair to you, because it's going to be an unfulfilling, exercise. You're not going to do it. So step back. You will see a lot, and so will they. Give them time, and give them the compliment of having the time to reflect on that, and then come back to it when you're both in a better space. Yeah.
That's so valuable. And I think the key too is everybody who does that to you is looking for the reaction. And your reaction, if you look at it as like, hey, I don't even understand that. In other words, if you're unaffected, all of the punch just left the statement, right? If you get real defensive, or you get aggressive backwards, or this and that, you've just fallen into someone's power over you, right?
Mhm.
You have a right to say, I'm not accepting that statement. I'm not engaging with you in this conversation.
Yeah.
Right? You had your shot. This is what you did with it. This is my response.
Yeah.
And unless something comes into my mind really quick to make me feel some justification, good luck to you. Right? It doesn't have to fit. Sometimes people were a stranger when you met them and a stranger when you left them. Nothing had to take place in between. And no one's obligated when no one even knows who it is or what it is they're talking to and about.
Yeah.
And at that point, you think of what's the next best thing I can do with my time? Why pay twice? I got hit with let's say, something disrespectful. Now I'm going to get angry. Now I'm going to do and say things I probably shouldn't have said because I overreact instead of responding.
Yeah.
And then why? And all of a sudden, the next person who I was going to meet is going to get the baggage I just carried from this conversation.
Yes, that's what you would call a contagion, where you're helping spread the thing that you don't want to get in the first place. When somebody's like coming at you, and then you respond to it, you didn't want it, but instead of helping, like, self-command, not respond in the moment, not react to it, you helped spread it. You helped enlarge the thing you didn't want, and now other people are going to get it. Because again, it's hard to shake that off. We walk around with that energy, and then I like pop off to the next person I meet, or I respond poorly to that, or I ignore what somebody said or whatever. That's how that happens. And that's how, a bad moment can become a really bad day. And a bad day, if it's bad enough, can be life-changing in wrong ways. And you don't have to go down that road. That's why that power of self-command is so important in that moment when someone's doing that. Step back. I know you didn't show up for my meeting because you just don't care. Maybe now isn't the right time. Maybe, has that happened to you before? I had a situation happen, but it doesn't matter what happened that prevented me from getting to the meeting. Again, this clearly has happened to you before. And I know that's a big deal. It takes a lot when you create the meeting, you do the agenda or whatever it is, and we put the time on the calendar, and then it doesn't happen in the way that we want it. And so I want to be sure that, I don't do that again. This time was unavoidable, but it really doesn't matter why, because you've moved past that into something else. What can we do moving forward? What can we do? Let's take all that. It already happened. Nobody can change it. And it doesn't matter why. We've already formed opinions about it. Don't do that. Let's go forward. Can we go forward with this? Or are we, is that all? I mean, it's up to you. I'm good either way, you know?
Yeah.
This is, yeah. And see where it goes. Don't shoehorn them into a decision that they may not want to make either. That's all or nothing kind of stuff. Never works. And so, see where you can go. But again, think about that as if, like, look at the person as a person, not a problem that you have to solve or get around. They're just a person. Stuff happens. People react poorly. Don't make it worse. Don't enable them to make it worse for themselves, and don't give them an opportunity to create a bad situation that they may not recover from. You actually can help them with that. And again, who wouldn't love to be helped with that ourselves before we do and say that thing that we're like, no, in the heat of the moment, I got myself fired because I told my boss off. Don't do that. You can stop yourself from that,
Well, I mean, yeah, and you're right. Momentum goes both ways. A big rejection could create a bad habit, could create something that's irreversible later on, and I think you can't allow dream stealers, people who you accept their opinion of you more than your opinion of yourself, even though they don't even know you, so it really shows weakness inside yourself from having to be that affected by so little, so fast, with so little trust in that person. But before we end the show, let's cover a lot of these wonderful people. Dennis says, agree, important to ask. If you don't ask, the answer is no. And we're not in the no. You're right. You can always, it won't hurt you to ask. You might not get anything. Help me, help you. So right, it's a two-way street if you let it. Agree, the key also helps to open doors in the relationships. Sidestepped ego, go with humility. Dean comes back with that anger will turn to resentment if not addressed, and it'll fester, and all of a sudden you'll forget even where it came from, but you'll own it. Agree, humor truly helps, and it's not just a rumor.
His rhymes, I swear.
Yeah, he's the best. Step back and see a lot. We talked about that. Dennis comes back with, I understand what you mean, but I know you're not mean. That's so true. Ambambola, you really can't get anything resolved when emotions are heightened. You're at your worst, when you're letting your emotions instead of your intelligence or your heart take over. Ashif says, I truly believe that there is always another way. Patience, compassion, or walking away. You can take a pause. Cars have neutral. Cars have reverse gears. You can say, I'll get back to it. Where's the fire? Because once you can't unring a bell. Once you say it, you can't take it back, even though you can apologize up and down, but it'll always be there. And what do you want to carry forward? And you can always say, listen, I was like you before I got smart. I hope you get smarter sooner, if you ask, the stranger will be less strange to you. There is a point where you just don't accept certain things at all, right? No one's going to tell me what to say or who to say it to or what I need to do, right? Who's the sheriff here? Who elected, who the boss, right? I agree. Let's go forward and not backwards. Thanks for reminding and educating us. If you ask, the stranger will be less strange to you. Get some clues before you solve the puzzle. Agree. Let's go forward and not backwards. Thanks for reminding and educating us. Ambambola comes back with self-control douses the tension and prevents that ugly situation from escalating.
Absolutely.
So true. So we covered an hour. Man, this flies by. It's like catching a wave, like surfing, and it just carries you. So what's your thoughts now on compliment Gretchen from where we started?
I think it's largely the same. I think it's going to be different for everybody, but I think that the more present you are with yourself, the more you can be with other people, which is a huge compliment to everybody. And I think that in both ways, right? But I think that also is just very, very important to remember is, everyone's coming from their own unique perspective, and their reactions and thoughts and behaviors are sort of the culmination of everything they've experienced up to that point, situationally or otherwise. So give them the compliment of personal respect that you don't know everything that's feeding into whatever their action response, whatever is. And then give everybody the time, and the respect and the gracious and the compliment of maybe readdressing it when it's a better time. I've always said that if you come at everything with curiosity, if somebody like surprises you with something super negative, it's okay. It's like, wow, whoa, how did we get here? Not angry. Just how do we get here all of a sudden? Well, I did? Really? Be curious about it, not flippant about it, but be curious. Help that other person walk a different mental path to arrive at a more mutually beneficial outcome for you both. And in the long run, they probably won't turn and go, thank you for that. But in the long run, when when things don't go the way that they could have gone, there's going to be a recognition there. You may never know it, but you've helped another person learn a new coping mechanism, a new skill, just by the way you help them through a situation. That's a big compliment. Yeah.
Well, and I think, really being able, if you're 100% sure, to say, hey, you're way out of line. I mean, and that's not a negative so much as you're just out of the ballpark. And it sets the response there, right? You push the envelope a little too far here, or you don't really know who you're talking to, obviously. And that doesn't fly, right? And that's where it is, right? It's not like a discussion. It's not close. But to finalize this wonderful session, I would say the number one compliment you should have is to yourself, because you're the only one who can control that too. There's a point where you say, good job, Don. You really pulled it off, or, hey, you exceeded expectations. I mean, why not, right? If you're judging people you don't know, why not judge who you know better than anybody else? And no matter what people say, you could say to yourself, I know this was really cool. If no one else sees it or even appreciates it, I'm thrilled with it. And that way, you don't need third-party validation to get individual and personal validation. And if a family member or a close friend says that to you, it really lights you up. If someone says, Gretchen, you're just on fire today, you're so exciting to be with and so much fun. I mean, all of a sudden it's like, well, what else can we do to build on it? What else can we do?
Exactly.
We're on a roll here, right? And that's what you want to do, is extend the wonderful complementary situations and minimize the ones who are starting off down the wrong road. And you just decide, again, it's like food. Here's what I'm in the mood for. I'm definitely not in the mood for any of that. And that could go with people too. There's a time and place for that person. And right now it's not here. And eventually priorities take over based on compliments. So with that said, thank you all so much. Tomorrow, so excited, we're going to have Beverly Glazer and Dina Lefkowitz for the first time. And that'll be super. And then Wednesday, we've got Leslie Flowers and Catherine Chadwick. And Thursday, we got Kelly. And then it just gets better and better. So thank you so much, Gretchen. Thank you, audience. Have a lovely day. Give yourself a compliment. And if you got an extra one to spare, save it for someone special today. Take care and have a lovely